Thousands of years ago, in the ancient land of Egypt, a powerful empire ruled with great wealth and strength. The Egyptian kingdom had mighty armies, enormous monuments, and a powerful ruler known as Pharaoh. But behind the glory of Egypt was a story of suffering. A group of people called the Israelites had been living in Egypt for many generations. Over time, they became slaves under Pharaoh's rule. They worked long hours, building cities and monuments, while their lives were filled with hardship and pain. The Israelites cried out for help, asking God to remember them and bring them freedom. Among these people, a special child was born. His name was Moses. At that time, Pharaoh had ordered that newborn Israelite boys should be killed because he feared the growing population of the Israelites. To protect her baby, Moses' mother placed him in a small basket and set him among the reeds along the Nile River. Amazingly, Pharaoh's daughter discovered the baby and decided to raise him as her own son. Moses grew up inside the royal palace of Egypt. He experienced the life of a prince, surrounded by wealth and power. But he never forgot his true heritage and the suffering of his people. One day, Moses saw an Egyptian mistreating an Israelite worker. Filled with anger at the injustice, Moses tried to defend his people. After this event, he left Egypt and traveled into the desert. There, far away from the palace, Moses began a new life as a shepherd. Years passed. Moses lived a quiet life, far from the power of Egypt. But God had a greater plan for him. One day, while Moses was watching his sheep near a mountain called Horeb, he saw something incredible. A bush was burning with fire, but it was not being destroyed. Moses walked closer to see this amazing sight. Then he heard a voice calling his name. Moses. Moses. God spoke to him from the burning bush and told him that he had heard the cries of the Israelites. God chose Moses to return to Egypt and lead his people out of slavery. Moses was afraid. He wondered how he could stand before Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler in the world. But God promised to be with him. With faith and courage, Moses accepted his mission. He returned to Egypt with a message for Pharaoh. Let my people go. But Pharaoh was not ready to give up his slaves. The greatest confrontation in history was about to begin. Moses had returned to Egypt with a message from God. Standing before Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler of the land, Moses delivered a simple command. Let my people go. But Pharaoh refused. He looked at Moses with pride and said that he would not release the Israelites. Pharaoh believed that no one had the power to challenge him, not even the God of Israel. Instead of giving freedom, Pharaoh made life even harder for the Israelites. Their work became more difficult, and their suffering increased. Many people began to lose hope. But Moses reminded them that God had not forgotten his promise. Then God began showing his power through a series of extraordinary events known as the 10 plagues of Egypt. The first sign was that the waters of the Nile River were changed, showing that Egypt's false gods could not stand against the power of God. Then came more signs. Frogs covered the land. Insects spread throughout Egypt. Diseases affected animals. Darkness covered the kingdom. Each event showed Pharaoh that he was not truly in control. But every time Pharaoh promised to let the Israelites go, he changed his mind. His heart remained stubborn. The final plague was the most serious of all. Moses warned Pharaoh that Egypt would face a great tragedy if he continued refusing God's command. God gave the Israelites instructions to protect themselves. They followed his command and marked their homes as a sign of faith. That night became a turning point in history. After the final plague, Pharaoh finally called for Moses. "Leave Egypt," he said. The Israelites were finally free. After generations of slavery, millions of people began their journey out of Egypt. Men, women, children, and families packed their belongings and followed Moses into the wilderness. They left behind the land where they had suffered for so long. But their journey was only beginning, because Pharaoh soon regretted his decision. Filled with anger, he gathered his powerful army and decided to chase after the Israelites. The Israelites looked behind them and saw the Egyptian army approaching. Fear spread among the people. In front of them was a huge sea. Behind them was Pharaoh's army. They felt trapped. But Moses stood before them and said, "Do not be afraid. God will deliver you." The greatest miracle was about to happen.
The Israelites stood at the edge of the sea. In front of them was a vast body of water. Behind them was Pharaoh's army, with hundreds of soldiers and powerful chariots racing closer. The people were terrified. They had escaped slavery, but now they believed they were about to be captured again. They cried out to Moses, "Why did you bring us here? Were there not enough graves in Egypt?" But Moses remained calm. He looked toward the sea and trusted God's promise. He said, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance God will bring." Then something extraordinary happened. Moses raised his staff toward the sea. A powerful wind began to blow. The waters started moving. Slowly, the sea began to separate. A path of dry ground appeared between the waters. The Israelites watched in amazement. Walls of water stood on both sides, creating a path through the sea. One by one, the people began crossing. Families walked forward. Children held their parents' hands. Elderly people moved carefully. Everyone crossed safely to the other side. The impossible had happened. God had made a way where there seemed to be no way. But Pharaoh's army continued chasing them. They entered the same path through the sea, believing they could capture the Israelites. However, as the Israelites reached safety, Moses raised his hand again. The waters began to return. The sea closed over the path, and Pharaoh's army could no longer continue. The Israelites stood on the shore and looked back. They realized they were truly free. After hundreds of years of slavery, they had finally escaped. The people celebrated with songs of joy and gratitude. They praised God for saving them and protecting them. Moses had shown that true leadership is not about power or wealth. It is about faith, courage, and trusting God even when the situation seems impossible. The crossing of the Red Sea became one of the most famous stories in the Bible. For millions of people, it represents hope during difficult times. It reminds believers that even in the darkest moments, a path forward can appear. But the journey of Moses and the Israelites was not finished. They still had a long road ahead through the wilderness. A new chapter of their story was about to begin. After crossing the Red Sea, Moses and the Israelites entered the wilderness. They were finally free from slavery, but their journey was far from easy. The desert was a difficult place. There was little water, limited food, and many challenges ahead. At times, the people became afraid and questioned whether they would survive. But God continued to guide them. During the day, they were guided by a cloud, and at night, a light helped them find their way through the darkness. When the people needed food, God provided for them. According to the Bible, a special bread-like food called manna appeared each morning, giving them strength for their journey. When they needed water, God provided a way for them to drink. Every challenge became a lesson in faith and trust. Later, Moses climbed Mount Sinai, where God gave him the 10 Commandments. These commandments became important teachings about how people should live, with respect, honesty, kindness, and devotion to God. Moses carried these commandments down from the mountain and shared them with the Israelites. They were no longer slaves. They were becoming a people with their own laws, beliefs, and purpose. The journey was not always easy. There were moments of doubt, disagreement, and fear. But Moses continued leading his people with patience and courage. He was not a king. He did not lead with an army or riches. He led with faith. Moses' story became one of the greatest examples of leadership in history. He showed that one person with courage and belief can create a powerful change. The story of Moses and the Red Sea is remembered by millions around the world because it represents freedom, hope, and the power of faith. It teaches that difficult times do not last forever and that courage can help people overcome impossible challenges. From a baby floating on the Nile River to a leader who guided an entire nation to freedom, the life of Moses remains one of the most inspiring stories ever told. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this Bible documentary, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories from the Bible and world history.